Long time before that, the full moon shone through drifting clouds, casting pale light over the towering silhouette of the Bohemian Magic Tower. The massive structure stood like an ancient machine, its hidden mechanisms slowly turning, producing the deep grinding sound of metal gears echoing into the darkness. From far away, its lit windows glowed like watchful eyes, and hidden behind those lights were sounds that should never exist in a place meant for knowledge. Muffled screams broke through the night air. Someone inside was gasping desperately for breath. The constant sound of suffering filled the room, deep, raw, and chilling enough to freeze anyone who heard it. Chains hung from the ceiling, rattling with every violent movement from the person bound to them. On one of the stone walls, a sheet displaying the anatomy of a skull was taped casually, as if this was just another day in a normal research facility. Then a voice cut through the air. "Control yourself, idiot. I'm just getting started. Don't even think about passing out now." The voice was sharp, cold, and impossible to forget. Another voice followed, calmly explaining the procedures being performed while injecting another stimulant into the restrained body. Moments later, a piercing scream exploded across the room, followed by the sickening sound of blood splattering across already stained stone floors. The walls and equipment were covered in dried layers of past experiments, clear evidence that this scene had repeated countless times before. Somewhere nearby, an executive calmly observed the results like reviewing routine data. A total of 461 seconds. It seems he resisted a bit longer with the reagent this time, considering the results this produced. At the center of the room, a young man was chained, his body covered in wounds and marks of torture. He was exhausted beyond limit, barely able to stay upright. The voice echoed again, commenting with detached interest that a talented test subject truly was different. They were inside the Bohemian Magic Tower. Around him, several mages wearing dark robes stood silently, observing and recording every reaction. One mage casually commented, 461 seconds after the 7-second magic circuit stimulant. Can we say the magic circle was activated and the immune reaction suppressed? Another responded, excellent. Let's also inject a memory expansion stimulant. The young man forced his blurred vision forward and saw the face of the person responsible for everything happening. In the most powerful magic tower in the empire, he was slowly and painfully dying. He could barely breathe. And inside his fading mind, one question pounded endlessly. Why? His eyes drifted across the laboratory filled with instruments, but one object captured his attention. A container filled with violently moving ants. The uncomfortable buzzing sound of countless insects climbing over each other filled the air. How had someone like him, once called a prodigy, ended up here? Then the cold voice returned again. Excellent. Now forcibly manifest the stimulant. At that moment, his mind was invaded again. His body reacted instantly. His back arched violently. His eyes widened. Blood spilled from his lips. Pain tore through muscle and bone, making the chains shake violently. His wrists, already shredded, tore further as he struggled. Then a desperate scream burst out. Stop. He was beyond desperation. Please stop this. Across the room, the tower master looked away with clear boredom. He complained that the noise was annoying and casually ordered to be informed once the experiment ended. One subordinate immediately confirmed the order. Meanwhile, Burton's consciousness drifted between awareness and blackout. His thoughts shattered into fragments. Why? Why am I dying in a magic tower? The place I always wanted to be. Before he could finish thinking, a hand grabbed his head and forced it upward. A loud slap echoed across the room. Hey, idiot. Control yourself. Verdun barely reacted. His bloodshot eyes slowly lifted toward the man standing before him. How are you feeling, Verdun? The voice sounded casual, mocking. The red-haired mage Weller smiled cruelly, leaning close with fake sympathy. He mocked Verdun, saying that even without mage talent, he still acted important because people called him intelligent. Behind him, other tower members watched like they were watching a performance. Weller continued sarcastically, explaining that Verdun's life force and knowledge were being extracted inside this secret laboratory. The other mages laughed quietly like satisfied spectators. Weller pushed Verdun's head backward and sneered, come on, say something. You think you're so smart, right? But Verdun stayed silent. Weller spoke again, filled with contempt, saying Verdun could not even pass out anymore in his current state. Verdun's eyes slowly dropped to the floor. There, a single ant walked across magic symbols drawn on the ground. Weller, irritated by the lack of reaction, demanded to know if Verdun was even listening. Then he followed Verdun's gaze. What? The experimental ants escaped. Weller exploded in rage, shouting at subordinates to fix the problem. One nervous mage replied that it was already too late. Weller crushed one of the ants under his foot and shouted insults. Another mage casually looked at Verdun and said he was basically an insect himself. No magic power. Not even strong enough to break a single chain. That was why there was no reaction. Another added that this made Verdun perfect. Thanks to him, they had a Class A test subject. Verdun said nothing. His eyes stared into emptiness while whispers continued around him. They mocked how Rolene, the friend he entered the tower with, got a scholarship to study abroad. Laughter echoed loudly. Verdun kept staring at the crushed ant. Something inside him finally started breaking. His teeth clenched. A small spark of clarity pushed through the exhaustion. Rage slowly bubbled under layers of pain. Then, with a weak voice, he whispered, "Shut." Weller turned in surprise and asked what he said. Then Verdun gathered every remaining piece of strength and screamed, "Shut your damn mouth, you sons of bitches." But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was happening because he was weak. 15 years ago, Verdun was just a child in an orphanage. His only dream was becoming an incredible mage. Eventually, he entered the magic tower as a common worker, trying to learn magic little by little. But no matter how hard he worked, he never advanced. He had a condition called growth limit, leaving him stuck at rank F. When he took his magic compatibility test at 7 years old, the result was devastating. Verdun could never become a mage. For him, it felt like a death sentence. But he never gave up. He secretly studied grimoires and books. Even without magic power, he relied on intelligence. Years passed, and eventually he became a researcher. Then for the first time, someone recognized his talent. Lukid praised him, calling him more than a genius, saying even Tower Master Balrog Besius needed to see his work. Verdun humbly said he needed to prove the thesis first. Lukid was shocked that he was the first person Verdun showed it to. Verdun confirmed it. Then coffee spilled onto the documents. Accident or sabotage, it was impossible to know. Lukid was the only friend Verdun believed he had in the tower. Days later, Lukid presented the research as his own. By the time Verdun found out, it was too late. The thesis had already been sent to the Tower Master. Verdun desperately begged to be believed. But Tower Master Balrog Besius, a man with dark hair and a white streak, simply asked if Verdun was claiming to be the creator of the multi-dimensional continuity theory. Verdun tried to explain everything. But Balrog interrupted and placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling with hidden cruelty. He ordered Verdun to come to his laboratory 2 days later when the moon was hidden. That was the moment everything ended. 7 years of torture began. By day, Verdun worked as a laborer. By night, he was used as a test subject. He was forced to draw magic circles, test drugs on his own body, invent potions, and analyze results. All in the name of the magic tower. If he spoke about it, people important to him would die. One night, lying on a cold damp floor, he remembered a sunny day. Rolene calling him happily. Promising they would become great mages together. He wanted to reach into the memory and warn his younger self. But memories cannot be changed. Back in the present, surrounded by ants, Verdun thought maybe death would be easier. Then a voice spoke. From the ants. It told him to hold on. For revenge. For survival. The ants merged into a dark human-shaped silhouette. It promised he would be reborn and gain power. Something reignited inside Verdun. He began writing formulas across the walls. He would finish the Defy the Heavens theory. A body reconstruction method to break destiny itself. Golden energy began responding to him. He whispered, "Tomorrow, I will break my limits." The next day, during the magic festival when most high-ranking mages left, Verdun started his plan. He entered the treasure vault under cleaning orders. He activated an artifact to block sound and descended underground. There, he found the staff capable of triple spellcasting and awakening latent talent. After 7 years of study, he broke the barrier and took it. Later, 2 guards were drinking and complaining about missing the festival. They mocked him and told him to get drinks. They never realized he already had the artifact. Moments later, one guard's head fell off his body. The other turned in shock. Verdun stood silently, pointing the artifact at him. The guard screamed in rage and began forming a water magic dome, shouting that an insignificant rat dared attack a mage. And for the first time in 7 years, Verdun did not look like a victim anymore. He looked like someone who had already decided who was going to die next. The magic gathering in the air twisted violently as the enemy mage completed his spell. It was a rank 3 spell known as Giant Wave. The water rose like a living wall, heavy, crushing, unstoppable, rushing forward with the sound of a roaring ocean trapped inside a hallway. Verdun watched the spell calmly, his eyes steady, his breathing controlled. He did not move in panic. Instead, he raised his hand and counterattacked with equal force. Rank 3 Magic, Earth Spear. The ground trembled as massive stone boulders erupted forward, piercing straight through the rushing wall of water as if it were nothing but mist. The stones tore through the spell and continued forward without losing momentum, striking the enemy directly. The man barely had time to react. His eyes widened in pure disbelief. In the next instant, his body slammed into the ground, a massive stone spear embedded deep into his chest. He trembled, coughing blood violently, barely able to speak. How could you? His voice shook as his eyes locked onto Verdun. How can someone like you, a mere rank 1, use magic? Verdun looked down at him, his expression calm, almost emotionless. What are you shocked that a mere test subject can cast magic? This is what happens when you play around with people too much. You and the tower, too. Without hesitation, he turned and walked away, leaving the dying man behind as if he were nothing more than debris. As he moved through the corridors, he passed guards slumped unconscious or collapsed against walls. The deeper he went, the quieter everything became. When he finally closed a heavy door behind him, he paused for a moment. This is the first time I've seen this up close. He had reached the core of the tower. The central heart. The place where the tower's power source pulsed like a living organ. The air itself vibrated with dense mana. Verdun slowly removed his shirt, revealing the mysterious symbol engraved across his back. The air hummed louder, reacting to him. His thoughts became sharp and focused. It took 7 years to reach this point. Now, using the source's mana, I will initiate defying the heavens. If I fail, I don't know what will happen to me, but if I don't try, I'll never know. The magic circles on his back began glowing intensely. The artifact staff rested firmly in his hands. With absolute determination, he drove the tip of the staff into the ground. At that moment, countless magic circles began linking together, forming a complex structure. Energy surged violently around him, spiraling faster and faster. Then he roared with everything inside him. Body reformation, defying the heavens. Mana exploded outward. Pure energy burst from him, piercing through the tower walls like divine light. Outside, a pillar of blinding light shot into the sky, visible for miles. On a nearby road, a carriage screeched to a stop. Inside, a figure stared out, eyes narrowed. This immense magical power. It's the power source's energy. What does this mean? The figure frowned, feeling deep unease. He knew exactly what it meant. Someone invaded the magic tower. It was Tower Master Balrog Besius. Meanwhile, the tower itself was collapsing. Roofs ripped apart. Walls shattered. The surrounding city suffered heavy destruction from the impact. Smoke and dust swirled across the ruins. From beneath broken stone, a hand slowly emerged, grabbing weakly at nearby rubble. Verdun pulled himself free. His entire body trembled. He could barely breathe. But he was alive. In front of him was complete devastation. The tower half destroyed. The ground fractured. The air still vibrating with lingering mana. He looked down at his hand and noticed the artifact staff beginning to crumble into black particles. It had enough power to destroy the entire area. And yet, I'm still alive. Still kneeling, surrounded by mist and debris, he whispered, did the defying the heavens theory work? Then something caught his attention. He looked up and saw intense light cutting through the sky. Teleportation portals opened. Someone was coming. Tower Master Balrog Besius floated above, scanning the ruins. Dust still hid the culprit. He raised his hands and unleashed explosions, trying to expose whoever caused this. Then he saw it. A teleportation magic circle. His fury exploded. All debris around him lifted into the air. I don't care who it is. Even if it's the Emperor or just some idiotic boy, I will find and kill them. Thunder rolled across the sky as if confirming his promise. Some time later, Verdun slowly woke under sunlight. His body felt heavy. His mind foggy. He wanted to keep sleeping. Suddenly, water was forced into his mouth and he choked awake beside a stream. He looked around, confused. Then he saw his reflection. My face, it changed. His hair was now gray. His eyes were now light blue. He was a different person. Was there a problem when reconstructing my body? But I'm sure the defying the heavens theory worked. Memories returned. He had activated the theory. Used teleportation. Escaped. Looking around the unfamiliar forest, he realized he had likely teleported to another continent. He laughed loudly. He was free. But he knew the tower would recover. And Balrog would retaliate. Revenge and proving my worth as a mage. Those are my only goals. Time passed. While walking through the forest, he found a goblin trying to open a wooden box. He raised his hand. Wind cutter. The invisible blade sliced the goblin instantly. Verdun stared at his own hand, confused. His appearance changed, but his mana capacity remained similar. Something about the reconstruction felt incomplete. Then he noticed carriage tracks. He followed mana traces and found a fleeing carriage driver screaming at his horses, panicking after surviving bandits and an unknown orc attack. Soon, the carriage overturned. The boy inside found himself surrounded by orcs and goblins. He screamed, thinking it was over. Then a voice shouted. Earth wall. A massive wall of earth rose, protecting him. From above, Verdun spoke casually about forgetting breathing holes. Flames formed in his hands. Multiple flaming arrows burned through the forest. The goblins burned. The orc leader ordered an attack. Verdun formed double incantation magic circles. Heatwave arrow. A massive explosion erased the battlefield. Later, inside the carriage, the driver Conrad thanked him repeatedly. Verdun only told him to watch the road. Conrad asked if he had been in danger. Verdun admitted slightly. They talked about thieves and barren PY territory. Verdun realized he teleported to the correct place. But the magic tower might search for him. He needed a new identity. When asked his name, he introduced himself as Asher. Soon after, they arrived at Baron PY Henrod's territory. Conrad explained everything. The Baron invited Verdun inside. Standing before a golden door, Verdun bowed politely. I would like to thank you for providing me with clothes, food, and a place to sleep. The man smiled. It seems I haven't introduced myself yet. I am Baron PY Henrod, the lord of this territory. Please have a seat. And just like that, the boy who was once a chain test subject stepped into a new stage of his life. Inside Baron PY Henrod's estate, everything looked almost unreal compared to the hell Verdun had escaped. Before him, a grand feast was served. Verdun, now introduced to everyone as Asher, thanked him, stating that everything was wonderful. The Baron watched him with a gentle smile and spoke as if this was all perfectly normal, as if he wasn't sitting across from a man who had crawled out of a collapsed magic tower. For saving Conrad, I have prepared 5 million elk. Tell me when you wish to receive them. And though it may seem hasty for me to ask this, if you don't mind, I would like to hire you for a job. I guarantee it will be very well paid. Verdun continued eating calmly, but in his mind, the calculation was immediate. Money was necessary. Revenge required preparation, and preparation required resources. And beyond that, this was also a chance to practice combat magic in a real setting, not in a cage or a torture chamber. So he responded in the same measured tone. Could you tell me what job you have in mind? The Baron's face darkened slightly, and the warmth in his eyes became heavier. He explained that a few days ago, bodies had been found hanging in the southern forest. According to the investigation, all of them were residents of a nearby farming town, and the town itself had been completely destroyed. His irritation was visible when he clasped his hands together, like he was physically restraining anger. Although they had not been sure who was responsible at first, they discovered it was the work of bandits. But when they tried to search the entire territory, there was nothing. No camp. No tracks. No trail. It was as if all traces had been erased with magic. Verdun wiped his mouth slowly and asked whether it was possible those bandits had mages among them. The Baron considered it speculation, not impossible but not confirmed either, and that was enough to sharpen Verdun's attention. He questioned when the Baron intended to hunt them down, and the Baron responded with only a brief smile, a kind of smile that made it clear the plan had already started moving. For days past, exactly the deadline the Baron had stipulated. When Verdun stepped forward to join the mission, a knight introduced himself with a respectful gesture, formal and composed. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am a knight of Baron Pyth and the commander of this mission, Enoch." Right behind him, two assistants approached while adjusting their equipment. Enoch gestured as he spoke. That one with the black hair was Harris, and the younger one was Peric. Peric looked practically glowing with excitement, grinning as if this was the greatest day of his life. "Nice to meet you, Sir Mage." Verdun, maintaining the false name he now carried, answered smoothly, as if he had been Asher his whole life. "The pleasure's mine. I'm Asher." As he greeted them, his mind replayed the Baron's words, and he couldn't help the dry irony of it. He had a feeling this could be a good opportunity, but who knew the job would involve hunting bandits. The Baron's image flashed again in his thoughts, alongside that casual remark that had carried the weight of a warning. "Don't you think it would be better to prevent things before they happen?" Verdun didn't particularly like being pulled into someone else's problem, but he had already decided. Even with some reluctance, he would go along with the plan. "I'm not taking advantage of the chance to be with them. I guess I'll consider this as payment for my stay." Before they departed, Verdun noticed a group of people gathered in the courtyard. They didn't move like knights. Their gear was mixed, practical, worn by travel. Curious, he asked, "Are these people also part of the plan?" Enoch replied without surprise, like it was obvious. "Oh, they're just adventurers." Verdun's gaze lingered on two men analyzing a map with serious expressions. One of them had dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, and he carried a large sword across his back like it was part of his spine. Enoch continued explaining that they joined after rumors spread about a strange orc that had appeared recently. Apparently, there was a generous bounty for killing it, enough to attract even gold-rank adventurers. Verdun noticed the necklace hanging around one of them, gleaming in the sunlight, and the words echoed in his head. Gold-rank adventurers were on the same level as trained knights. Veterans. People who used energy to amplify weapons and bodies beyond normal limits. Rumors even claimed that those at that level could cut mountains. And yet, despite all that manpower, Verdun silently reflected, if they still need me, then this situation might be worse than it looks. The group moved out, and soon the trail led into the forest. Dense vegetation surrounded them as they advanced, and the deeper they went, the more the air felt wrong. Enoch approached Verdun with a request that sounded polite but carried tension underneath it. "Asher, please let us know if there's indeed a mage among the bandits." Verdun nodded, but he also asked what he needed to know. "Of course, but may I know why you need me?" Enoch explained with an awkward smile that normally, second-rate mages were similar in strength to common knights, but once long-range spells were involved, it became far harder for knights to approach. The ideal was to avoid high-level magical combat. Verdun listened and then responded, dry and direct, "That's a shame." Enoch stared, surprised, and for a moment he actually started to sweat, like he had realized too late what kind of person he had hired. "Don't tell me that." Before anyone could push further, Verdun stopped among the trees. His expression sharpened instantly. The atmosphere tightened like a rope being pulled. He raised his arm and warned them. "There's a magic circle right in front of us." In one smooth movement, he cast his magic. Dispel. The invisible barrier shattered. The ground beneath them began glowing red, and mystic lines appeared rapidly, forming a massive activated magic circle. Everyone's eyes widened. One of the members exclaimed in disbelief, "A magic circle just appeared. How can something like that exist within the territory?" Verdun stayed calm as if he were dismantling a child's toy. "It seems the previous spell I deactivated was just a camouflage. This one serves to alert the caster." He ordered everyone to step back and said he would handle it too. He channeled his magic with a firm gesture, and a trace of energy sliced through the air cleanly, precisely. The group waited at a distance, watching, until one knight's eyes widened with an almost offended kind of disbelief. He can deactivate magic circles with such ease. Verdun remained serene, wrapped in a subtle aura, as if none of this deserved attention. Enoch said nothing, but inside, something shifted. He began to wonder if the man beside him was truly who he claimed to be. As they moved forward again, the narration of what they were facing felt almost unavoidable, because this wasn't simply a bandit hunt. Explorers were men and women who belonged to guilds. They accepted commissions across the continent, traveled through unexplored lands, and fought monsters that threatened villages, protecting the defenseless with swords, magic, and sheer determination. But that life had a truth people didn't like to say out loud. Death walked beside every adventurer. Many admired them anyway, because skill brought fame and wealth. And over time, some adventurers became so powerful after repeated near-death experiences that they began losing control. Desire consumed them. Honor collapsed. Their targets stopped being monsters and became humans. Their eyes no longer distinguished right from wrong. And when that happened, they weren't heroes anymore. They were bandits. Not far away, the people Verdun was hunting were already unraveling. One of them stomped the ground, face twisted in frustration. "Damn it," he shouted. "The damage done by Baron Pyyy's strike team hasn't even been cleaned up yet, and now we're being attacked by goblins and orcs." His eyes were fixed on a dead animal in front of him, as if even prey was mocking them. "And to make matters worse, we're running out of food." He bellowed at the others. "What the hell are you doing? Don't just stand there. Go hunt something." Harris narrowed his eyes through the vegetation. "I think that's them." One of the soldiers whispered carefully, "What should we do, Sir Enoch?" "We're awaiting your orders." Enoch watched the enemy group and noticed something important. Their posture was lazy. Their formation was loose. Their attention was elsewhere. They had lowered their guard. His voice sharpened with decision. "They've lowered their guard. We'll attack immediately." But before the command could fully drop like a blade, Verdun interrupted, tone controlled but firm. "Wait, Sir Enoch. I accompanied you as a countermeasure against mages, but we haven't assessed the enemy's strength yet. If their mage is of a higher circle than mine, we could lose." Enoch hesitated, the kind of hesitation that could get people killed, but it also meant he was listening. He began to argue anyway, trying to push the urgency. "But Sir Asher, if they start to move," and Verdun didn't respond with emotion. He kept his gaze fixed, silent, until he said there was a way. On the other side of the forest, two low-guard men were cleaning their swords, unaware that death was already walking toward them. The one with long hair tied into a ponytail spoke bitterly. "After all the effort I made to expand our operating area, that subordinate I recruited from the village ended up dead." The other snapped back, clearly exhausted. "Enough complaining, Variah. Let's think of a countermeasure. Who would have thought that an orc that laughs like a clown would come and kill all our subordinates?" Variah sighed long and hard, scratching his head with irritation, and for a moment his voice sounded almost nostalgic, like he was mourning a version of himself that didn't exist anymore. He never imagined life would end like this when he was still an explorer. Things were simpler back then. Then the bitter thought surfaced, sharp and ugly. "If only I hadn't been caught killing another explorer for money. How I miss those days." He looked at his companion with a twisted smile. "Vilshan, how about we attack another village?" Vilshan denied it immediately, his tone firm. "That won't work." The Baron was furious about the bodies hanging in the trees. He crossed his arms and continued, focused, practical, like a man who had already accepted what he was. "They've been hiding too long with concealment magic. It was time to move." He heard there was a city called Martes nearby. He suggested looting the village near there. But before he could finish the sentence, a fiery blast cut through the air at high speed. The ground exploded into flames. The sudden heat and shock knocked their senses sideways. But it didn't stop there. The flames triggered a larger explosion, forcing both men to defend themselves with a hastily conjured magic circle. The realization hit immediately, cold and sharp. This isn't just an explosion. It's magic. We've been discovered. On the other side, the knights and their allies surged forward as soon as the opening was created. Swords rose. Boots crushed dirt. Harris, Perrick, and Enoch pushed through the curtain of fire with determination, launching a coordinated assault. The forest turned into a battlefield of chaos. Shards of magic, bursts of energy, and steel strikes crisscrossed the air. Vilshin tried to conjure again, but before he could react, a precise blow smashed into his face. Vilchin! Varaya screamed as he saw him fall. Vilshin managed to push words out through pain, explaining quickly that the mana barrier was a quick conjuration defensive ability, but it broke easily. It wasn't durable at all, and breaking a mana barrier caused a huge impact on the caster. Varaya's eyes widened, and the urgent thought formed like a scream inside his skull. That guy, he's a mage. Meanwhile, Verdun, still wearing the name Asher, completed his analysis of the situation with terrifying calm. A magic circle glowed in his hand as if it were a quiet promise of violence. He said evenly, "Now that we know their strength, I will face the mage as agreed." Enoch, kneeling and gasping after the first clash, didn't argue. He simply trusted him. Across the battlefield, Varaya's face twisted with fury. "So, the Baron really wants to exterminate us this time, huh?" The truth stung. The Baron had even hired a mage. But Varaya didn't crumble. His gaze hardened. He drew his blade quickly and shouted, full of defiance, swearing nothing would go as planned, claiming he would send his head as a response. Even under pressure, Enoch answered with an ironic bite. "Ha, that's really scary. Try if you can." Asher moved. He propelled himself upward so fast it felt like the forest itself was being torn apart. Trees cracked and splintered in his path. Ahead of him, the blue-haired mage was already conjuring magic circles to escape, desperate and fast, but Asher could still pursue. As the enemy ran, he muttered in relief, calculating his chances. "Good thing he's following me using Earth Wall. Only mages of the third circle and above can use flight. This guy is just a second circle." Asher landed on a conjured pillar of earth, looking down at him like a judge watching a criminal flee. His voice cut through the chaos. "How much longer are you going to stand there?" The blue-haired mage raised his weapon and conjured multiple ice arrows. Blue streaks sliced through the air, aimed at Asher with increasing speed. "Then I'll attack him first," the enemy decided. "If he's just a second circle, I'll kill him now before escaping." But on top of that earth pillar, Asher didn't move. Magical flames rose around his body as he invoked his spell. "Multi-flame arrows," he declared firmly. Flaming magic circles formed above him, glowing intensely, and fire arrows launched in sequence like a rain of punishment. The impact shook the ground so violently it carved an immense hole into the earth. When the dust began to settle, the blue-haired mage was still standing, but barely. He was gasping. Blood streamed down his face, and the look in his eyes had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by the sharp pain of reality. He had underestimated his opponent. "Not bad for a second circle, but you chose the wrong guy to mess with." The forest fell into an uneasy silence as the dust settled. In the distance, Verdun's silhouette slowly emerged between broken trees and scorched earth. Vilshin, still breathing heavily, forced a crooked smile and spoke with forced confidence. "If you had come with the knight, I would be at a disadvantage, but I can face you alone and escape." His words echoed hollowly in the clearing. Verdun stopped a few steps away and looked at him coldly. His answer was short and absolute. He had no intention of letting him go. Vilshin's eyes narrowed as he studied Verdun more carefully. Someone this young, capable of calmly using multiple attributes, was not normal. It had been a long time since he had seen such promising talent. But admiration twisted into madness, and with an insane laugh and a chilling gaze, he sneered, "You probably never imagined you'd be crushed here today, did you?" At that moment, Vilshin revealed his true strength. He was a third circle mage. Ice magic surged violently as he raised both hands. The temperature dropped instantly. High above, an enormous mass of ice formed, like a falling iceberg suspended in the sky. Vilshin shouted with all his might, "Die!" The massive ice formation began to descend, slow but unstoppable. Vilshin laughed excitedly, convinced this was the end. Then his expression stiffened. Something had appeared beneath the falling ice. Verdun had summoned an earth defense, creating a solid structure that blocked the iceberg completely. The impact shook the ground, but the ice did not reach him. Vilshin stared in disbelief. How had he blocked that spell? But it did not end there. Verdun gathered his energy and cast another spell. Earth Spear. The protective beams he had created suddenly sprouted sharp spikes. The entire ice mass shattered violently, exploding outward in fragments. Vilshin staggered back, stunned, and muttered in disbelief, "How can someone from the second circle use a third circle spell?" Verdun did not answer. Instead, he focused his mana again. One of the shattered ice fragments rose into the air, controlled perfectly. He looked at Vilshin and said calmly, "Well, try to guess." Vilshin's eyes widened in horror. Not only could Verdun use third circle magic, he possessed 4 attributes. In that moment, Vilshin understood the truth. From the very beginning, this man had been hiding his true power. Verdun moved forward with cold intent. The ice fragment shot forward like a blade and pierced straight through Vilshin's chest. His body collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Verdun stood still for a moment. Coming here had been the right decision. He had gained valuable experience fighting another mage. But before he could relax, a sound echoed from the edge of the forest. A red orc lifted its head. What stood out immediately was the golden necklace around its neck, the same one previously seen on one of the adventurers. It held a piece of fresh prey in its hand and looked up with a sinister grin, letting out a low, mocking grunt. 2 days before the expedition, Verdun had created an experimental medicine using ingredients he brought from the magic tower. He called it the magic circuit dilator. Every time he remembered the hell he had endured there, he swore he would never experiment on humans again. But thanks to that medicine, he had been able to reach the third circle. Verdun looked down at Vilshin's body. He was definitely dead. Should I leave clues that the bandits were defeated if they want to prove they completed the mission and earn their trust? As he thought this, he bent down and picked up Vilshin's staff. Using his appraisal ability, he identified it as a magic stone wand with an applied spell that reduced casting time and increased the effectiveness of ice magic. Verdun immediately recognized its value. This could be very useful. His thoughts were interrupted when someone ran toward him. "Asher, so you're well. Thank God. I was worried about you after we took care of all the bandits." Verdun turned and bowed slightly to Perik, apologizing quickly. He explained that the mage had been stronger than expected, which was why it took longer. Perik looked around at the devastation and swallowed. From the damage alone, it was clear the battle had been intense. Perik began organizing the area, collecting items. Verdun asked whether the bandits had been dealt with. Perik replied that they had, but their leader was still alive. "Sir Enoch is fighting him now. It should be resolved by the time we get back." Verdun hesitated, then asked a question. Showing the wand, he asked what should be done with the bandits' belongings. Perik smiled. "Our Lord said if something catches your eye, as long as we don't need it, you can keep it." The Baron's image flashed through Verdun's mind. He would make good use of this. When they returned, everyone praised Asher's contribution. Enoch approached him sincerely. "If it weren't for you, we would have had many more casualties." Verdun answered humbly, saying it had been valuable experience for him. Nearby, Varia was tied up, defeated. When Vilshin's corpse was thrown before him, his eyes widened in disbelief. How was this even possible? Desperation took over. He secretly pulled out a small dagger while thinking frantically. "Damn it. If this continues, we'll be taken to the Lord and executed. I can't die here. There's still so much I want to see. I have no choice. I'll escape." He broke free suddenly, swinging his sword and striking at nearby soldiers. "Get out of my way." Enoch stepped forward, sword raised. Varia thought desperately. Without Vilshin's magic, there's only one option. Kill the knight, steal his horse, and escape. He attacked. Enoch blocked him cleanly. Varia pulled out his dagger and lunged with a wild grin, but Enoch dodged smoothly and countered with a brutal punch that sent him crashing to the ground. Varia lay there stunned, unable to understand what had happened. He dropped his sword. Guards rushed in and restrained him under Enoch's orders. Varia screamed in rage, how dare you throw away your sword? Don't you have pride as a knight?" Enoch laughed, clicking his tongue. Then his expression hardened. He raised his sword and said coldly, "Pride is something only the living can afford, my bandit friend." Another bandit was finished. As the body was dragged away, Enoch turned to Verdun and apologized for making him witness such a scene. He admitted that with more time, it would have been cleaner. Verdun only laughed. Impressive work, Sir Enoch. Behind them were several captured survivors. Verdun asked why they were being spared. Enoch explained that some might be survivors from the farming village massacre, and their identities needed confirmation before judgment. Harris ordered everyone to prepare to return. As guards helped the prisoners up, one bandit suddenly tried to flee, screaming that he didn't want to die. He collapsed after a few steps. Harris approached to handle it, but Verdun stopped him. Wait a minute. Something's wrong. The desperate screams filled the air. Harris suddenly smelled blood. A strong scent. Too strong. Something struck him violently. The head of the fleeing bandit rolled across the ground. A massive shadow emerged from the trees. Sweat trickled down Verdun's face. This wasn't just an orc. The red orc laughed, towering over them. One soldier whispered in disbelief, and they call this thing an orc. But worse, there were dozens like it nearby. Verdun recalled his earlier encounter. The unnatural smile. The size. The presence. It had evolved. The leader dragged its sword along the ground and pointed at the humans. Its subordinates surged forward. Enoch shouted orders. Focus on the goblins first. The orc later. They blocked the first attack, but the force sent Enoch flying. The creature tried to crush him, but Perrick and Harris intervened. The monster fell briefly, and Enoch seized the chance, plunging his sword deep into it. They thought it was over. Then the orc picked up a goblin and devoured it whole. Bones fell to the ground. The wounds closed. Enoch laughed nervously. He healed himself by eating one of his own. Everyone braced themselves. Prepare to fight. The red orc stepped forward and hurled its sword. The spinning blade tore through the air. Harris barely blocked it. Sparks exploded. Then the steel cracked. Harris stared as his sword shattered. Pain followed instantly. Blood sprayed as he screamed and fell back. Perrick shouted his name in despair. The orc appeared before Perrick in a blink. Perrick attacked with everything he had. His sword pierced the monster. But it didn't fall. The blade was stuck. Perrick tried to pull it free. The orc's massive hand reached for him. And in that moment, the battlefield froze in dread. The moment Perrick's life hung by a thread, Verdun acted. Without hesitation, he cast a spell. Earthbreaker. The ground surged violently as multiple attacks slammed straight into the creature's face, forcing it backward and finally creating a narrow opening. Dust and debris filled the air as Verdun shouted, "Over here, Sir Perrick." Perrick didn't waste a second. He pulled himself free, retreating quickly and repositioning behind Verdun. Breathing hard, he looked at him with gratitude and said that he had survived. But the relief on his face vanished almost instantly, replaced by shock. And now, Asher, I couldn't retrieve my sword. Verdun had already analyzed the situation. Calmly, he replied, I think its recovery speed and physical durability were strengthened after it ate that goblin earlier. Perrick clenched his teeth. That strike had been everything he had, a full-powered blow aimed at cutting the enemy's arm. He had never heard of an orc this strong. Could it be some special entity from legends? The thought escaped him almost involuntarily. Verdun's response startled him. It was nothing of the sort. He explained that regeneration and strengthening through consumption allowed the orc to command weaker ones and drive them into madness. That ability gave it enough power to dominate even trained knights. This was not a legendary being, but it was definitely a different type of orc. Sweat ran down Perrick's face. Even if that was the case, the monster still didn't feel like something beyond comprehension. After all, there was a limit to all common magic. Even with more mana, magic could not expand endlessly. If it exceeded that limit, the magic itself would extinguish. That was the rule of magic. However, there was one spell that did not follow this rule. Verdun raised his hand and began channeling mana into his fingertips. A massive magic circle unfolded in the air as he chanted geography manipulation. The circle formed line by line, and a violent wind erupted around them, throwing everyone off balance. The earth began to tremble. Desperate voices rose from the soldiers. First other species and now earthquakes. I was wrong. We're all going to die here. Seeing their fear, Enoch shouted for everyone to hold their position, telling them it was Asher's magic. But as the ground split open before their eyes, even he wondered if those words had been a mistake. How could anyone stay calm before a sight like this? The terrain shifted violently. A massive pit formed beneath them, swallowing creatures whole. Goblins screamed as they fell. Even the large red orc was dragged down, crushing several goblins beneath its weight when it hit the bottom. Verdun appeared at the edge of the crater. Above him, a large magic circle formed, glowing with heat. He cast a third-level spell. Flame Ball. The fireball soared into the pit and exploded across the entire surface. Goblins burned instantly. Their screams were short-lived. Peric's excitement spilled over. Wow, they're burning well. Burn them all. Enoch, busy helping Harris, shot him a look. Peric tried to restrain himself, but he couldn't hide his satisfaction. Watching enemies thrown into the air was far too satisfying. Geography manipulation had no expansion limit, but no mage used it as a primary spell. The mana cost was extreme, and the return rarely justified it. Verdun, already visibly exhausted, touched his neck and thought, if only I had enough mana. I hope to create a force superior to 3rd level, but it's below my expectations. Just as it seemed to be over, a shock rippled through the ground. A fierce scream echoed from below. The orc, its body cracked and burning, devoured goblins one after another. Everyone stared in disbelief. It was still alive. Peric grabbed Verdun's clothes in panic, asking what they should do. Verdun's answer was simple in his mind. If not by fire. A bluish magic circle spread across the pit, releasing a terrifying wave of water. Before anyone could react, Verdun leaped down into the crater. Gasps filled the air. As he descended, he cast another spell. Multiple ice arrows, followed by Winter Blast. That should be strong enough to freeze it to death. The magic struck the orc. Goblins froze solid instantly. But the orc remained unfrozen, reaching toward Verdun. Without hesitation, Verdun began running. Even if you can regenerate infinitely or feel no pain, if your body freezes, you won't be able to move. He cast Frozen Orb. For a brief moment, the two stared at each other. Then freezing air surged forward, engulfing the orc and finally sealing it in solid ice. Verdun exhaled deeply, believing the battle was finally over. Far away, in the Magic City of Vent, 2 men sat drinking tea. The younger one asked if the other had heard the news about the magic tower. The older man scoffed, saying he had now seen everything. According to reports, the tower's power source had exploded and the tower was now isolated. He questioned whether that was believable, stating that most of the remaining mages had disappeared and the tower's functions had completely stopped. As they spoke, a group of 4 mages passed by, complaining among themselves. Sending us for practice was too difficult. It's been so long since I felt what civilization is like. The scale of the damage is too great to consider the explosion of the power source as the sole cause. One of them overheard the older man say, the public is saying it was divine punishment or a man-made disaster. Nothing caught their attention until he added, someone must have plotted to seal the Tower of Bohm. The group stopped abruptly. One of them grabbed the older man by the collar and demanded he repeat what he had said. Confused, the man asked for an explanation. When the hood was removed, the face revealed was Rollins. Shocked, she demanded to know what had happened to the magic tower of Bohemian. Meanwhile, back in Baron P.Y. Henrod's territory, celebration filled the hall. Beer mugs clinked as everyone congratulated one another on their safe return. The Baron had organized a banquet to honor them. Everyone did a great job, he declared. It's a miracle there were no casualties. Looking around, he noticed Asher was not present. Already flushed with wine, the Baron spotted him approaching and exclaimed, "Ah, here he comes." Verdun adjusted his tie and apologized for being late. The Baron laughed, clapping him on the shoulder and handing him a glass of wine, saying he had arrived just in time. Verdun thanked him and noticed the soldiers celebrating together. "By the way," he said, "I didn't expect you to invite even the common soldiers to the banquet." The Baron smiled simply and replied that they protected the territory. Did social status really matter? Turning back to Verdun, the Baron asked, "Speaking of which, about those bandits you subdued? Weren't they too strong to be just bandits?" Verdun took a sip of wine and replied that they were different from common bandits, and with that level of skill, they likely didn't need to steal to survive. The Baron gestured to his side, where a man produced a scroll. Your words are partially correct. This will help you understand. The scroll contained images and information. The two men were wanted criminals, former gold-rank adventurers who had killed their companions and fled 1 or 2 years ago. Their whereabouts had been unknown, but it was believed they formed a bandit group. Gold rank was the 4th highest adventurer rank, earned through countless achievements. Verdun studied the scroll and thought, now I understand why there was a 10 million elk bounty on them. He glanced at the Baron and noticed his excitement. The Baron looked like a child with a new toy. Verdun asked why he was staring like that. The Baron had to be restrained by his employee before explaining. Not only had Verdun dealt with the bandits, but he also eliminated the subspecies on behalf of the fallen adventurers. The Adventurers Guild had sent their thanks. Verdun was a benefactor of the territory. Verdun laughed and said it was nothing. The Baron cleared his throat, embarrassed, admitting he had gotten carried away. He raised his glass and announced, let's raise our glasses to Asher, the mage who saved the territory of Pyth. The hall echoed with voices shouting, a toast to Sir Asher. The banquet was nothing like the cold cruelty of the magic tower. Everyone laughed together, ignoring status and rank. The warmth of the place eased Verdun's heart. For the first time since escaping Bohemian, he truly smiled, unaware of the chaos the tower's collapse was still causing. Elsewhere, Rollin returned to the magic tower with a heavy heart. Seeing the structure still standing, she believed the rumors had been exaggerated. A man carrying a wooden box greeted her and asked if she had returned from Vent. She replied that she had heard the power source went out of control, but she was relieved the tower looked intact. She asked about Verdun. The man hesitated and admitted that Verdun was on the missing persons list. He pointed toward a board. Rollin rushed forward and froze. Among the names was Verdun's face. Missing person number 31. The report stated that Verdun had been working in the energy room and was presumably exposed to mana from the power source. Body not confirmed. Memories flooded her mind. The last time she had spoken to him. The unanswered questions. Will I never see Verdun again? Tears welled up as despair crushed her chest. He was more than a friend. He was family. A hand rested gently on her head. Stop this. Taking your frustrations out on others won't change anything. She looked up and saw Mr. Valdek. He draped his cloak over her shoulders as she asked what had truly happened to the magic tower. His answer was calm and heavy. It's as you saw. While the high-ranking mages were away attending the magic festival, disaster struck the heart of the Bohemian magic tower. The energy source went berserk without warning. Every mage stationed in the central area, including the manager responsible for overseeing the source, was completely annihilated. And it did not end there. All accumulated data and research records were wiped out entirely, as if they had never existed. Even the magic circle protecting the treasure vault was damaged, resulting in losses that could never be recovered. The destruction of the vault's second circuit alone meant the loss of countless magic books and artifacts gathered over many years. The scale of the damage was incalculable. As the man explaining this clenched his fists, his expression darkened further. But among all these losses, the most regrettable one weighed heavily on his mind. The loss of test subject 77. If only they had recovered his brain intact, they could have reconstructed the lost records and experimental results. The thought gnawed at him, but he quickly composed himself and changed his expression before continuing. At least, there was still a chance for revenge. They had found clues pointing to the culprit responsible for making the energy source go berserk, even though that person had escaped. Hearing this, the girl standing before him widened her eyes in shock and immediately asked what he meant. He explained calmly that someone had disappeared without a trace 3 hours before the incident. Using the authority and power of other magic towers, he traced that person's movements and discovered something significant. He held out a red triangular cord. The moment she saw it, her breath caught. She recognized the emblem instantly. The Black Hour. A secretive organization that researched magic in the shadows of the world and used it as a tool to dominate others. The question burned in her mind. Why would they target the magic tower? He continued speaking. He did not know how the Black Hour had infiltrated the tower or how they had triggered the energy source, but it was certain that they were involved. He was planning to form a Black Hour extermination unit, both to uncover the truth and to appease the souls of those who had died meaninglessly. Then he added that there was a place reserved for her as well. There's a place for you too, Roan. Before he could say anything more, the girl clenched her fists tightly. The necklace around her neck snapped apart as energy burst outward from her body, fueled by grief and rage. The man understood her answer without needing to hear it. Unaware of the storm that was brewing within the magic tower, a few days passed quietly. At the Adventurers Guild in PYY's territory, Verdun arrived and asked if they had been waiting long. The man who received him immediately bowed apologetically. In front of him stood a man wearing military armbands, his face tense with nervousness. He apologized sincerely to Sir Asher. The danger level of that orc had been assessed as the highest possible, and gold-rank adventurers had been dispatched. They never expected such an outcome. Verdun let out a long sigh and replied that it was fine. It had simply been a coincidence. The man wiped the sweat from his forehead and presented a certificate. It was the reward for the subjugation. Adding the adjusted danger bonus and the reward for bringing back the body of the new orc species, the total came to 24 million elks. After tax deductions, 12 million remained. Verdun examined the document carefully. The man quickly explained that non-guild members were required by imperial law to pay a 50% tax on rewards. Even if the guild wanted to exempt him, they could not do so without risking charges of embezzlement or tax evasion. However, there was a legal way to avoid such taxation. Without hesitation, Verdun asked directly if they wanted him to become an adventurer. The man stood up enthusiastically, smiling. That was exactly what he wanted. In their guild, higher rank meant lower tax, and since Sir Asher was a special case, they could start him directly at silver rank. Verdun considered it briefly. Becoming an adventurer could restrict his movements in the future. For now, his priority was money and strength. Nothing else mattered. Before the man could push further, Verdun interrupted him with a wry smile. That was enough for now. He asked them to process the payment as it was. Even after 7 years of living as a guinea pig in the Bohemian Magic Tower, Verdun's essence remained unchanged. He was a mage. A seeker of mysteries. A researcher. That was why he had brought the body of the defeated variant to the guild's warehouse in Pithri. The creature was massive, still partially frozen, preserved by a special artifact that prevented decay. The smell was overwhelming. Verdun covered his nose, noting that its condition was far from ideal. He examined the orc closely. Its reddish pupils and skin were expected, but its torn mouth and abnormally large physique stood out. Yet these traits alone were not enough to classify it as a higher-level species like an orc warrior or orc lord. Its intelligence was also lacking. This was not evolution. It was a mutation. As he studied the body further, something caught his attention. A small scar above the creature's head. Regeneration restored the body to its previous state. This orc could regenerate burned flesh and torn limbs, yet this small wound remained. That meant the regenerative ability had been acquired after the injury. If that was the case, then the conclusion was terrifying. For a demi-human to acquire new powers after birth, the only known method was evolution. And if this was not natural evolution, then someone had created this variant artificially. Verdun placed a hand on his own head and took a deep breath. This was the worst possible scenario. Later, he met with his former battle companions. He told Peric and Enoch that they did not need to come all that way just to say goodbye. Peric smiled brightly and said there was no way he would skip this. Verdun had saved his life. This was the least he could do. Verdun scratched his head and replied that he felt he had already received too much. He wore a new cloak and a ring. The ring enhanced circulation, and the beast leather cloak increased mana capacity and recovery speed. Enoch told him not to feel uncomfortable accepting them. It was only fair. Verdun thanked them sincerely. Finally, he said his farewell. Stay healthy until we meet again. As he walked away, Peric shouted that if he ever visited a Conrad Merchant Guild branch, he should mention his name. Verdun waved lightly and disappeared into the forest. He soon arrived at a small village located on the border between PY territory and the Martsbaron. Using a flight spell, he landed quietly and opened his map. This was the only village between the city and the barren lands. If he rested here for one night and left for the city the next day, the timing would be perfect. He bought an apple and was about to eat when he heard whispered complaints nearby. Curious, he listened. It seemed there might be useful information. He cast Wind Whisper, a gossiping spell, and clearly heard them talking about goblins stealing livestock. Hiring adventurers was costing them a fortune, even though they believed they could handle it themselves. The village chief insisted it would be resolved by the next morning. Verdun leaned against the wall, calmly eating his apple. Goblins were common pests. Small thefts at first, then village raids if their numbers grew. Hiring adventurers was the standard response. Nothing unusual. Then he heard another rumor. A man named James had reportedly seen something in the forest. The village chief had told them to stay quiet. But the man described it anyway. A goblin with a torn mouth, bigger than an orc, devouring a wild boar. The others dismissed it, worried adventurers would demand higher pay if they heard such nonsense. Verdun dismissed his spell and smiled faintly. A large goblin with a torn mouth. That was too familiar to be coincidence. The scene shifted to another forest. An arrow flew through the air and pierced a goblin's face cleanly. A woman laughed proudly and asked her companion if she had improved. Her name was Mina, a silver-ranked adventurer. The man beside her, Loki, scoffed and teased her for bragging about an easy shot. They bickered openly until two others ahead of them intervened. Iris and Mild, both silver-ranked, reminded them they were on a mission. Mild pointed ahead. A cave. A goblin den. Iris examined the area and noted a totem made of animal and human bones. A symbol of superior species. Hobgoblins. She instructed them to destroy alert devices before entering. She cast imbued vision, allowing everyone to see clearly in the dark. Loki praised her leadership. As they prepared to advance, Iris suddenly stopped. Something felt wrong. There was mana in the air. Faint, unfamiliar. She told the others it was nothing. But deep in the forest, something was already watching them. And that's where this episode ends. So if you want the next episode, where we finally see the mystery revealed, and who's watching the deep of the forest, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next part. The knights thought they were about to die. Steel clashed, screams filled the forest, and blood soaked into the dirt as goblins swarmed from every direction. A massive red orc stood at the center of it all, laughing, its torn mouth stretched unnaturally wide as it devoured its own kind to heal. One knight was already on his knees. Another screamed as his sword shattered in his hands. The creature raised its weapon again, slow and confident, certain that this hunt was over. Then the ground exploded. The earth itself split apart, swallowing goblins whole. Flames rained down from above, turning the battlefield into a sea of fire. A shockwave ripped through the forest, forcing everyone to the ground. When the dust finally settled, the monster froze mid-laughter. Standing at the edge of the newly formed crater was a lone mage, cloak fluttering, eyes cold and sharp. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look afraid. He looked bored. With a single motion of his hand, the fire stopped. Ice followed. The orc roared and charged, but before it could take 3 steps, its body was locked in place, frozen solid by magic so precise it felt deliberate, almost surgical. The knights could only stare. This wasn't brute force. This wasn't luck. This was someone who understood power far too well. No one knew who he was. They called him Asher, a wandering mage who appeared out of nowhere. To them, he was a hero who arrived at the perfect moment. A savior who crushed monsters without breaking a sweat. But what they didn't know was that this man wasn't born strong. He wasn't trained by legends. And he didn't awaken his power through talent or fate.